So I'll call the Education Committee meeting together, and we're here, and so we always begin with just a welcome and a check-in with, we're starting at a little bit after 5, so I wonder if some of us have to depart early or a reminder to turn our cell phones, or maybe you have to have your cell phone on for some reason, just a check-in. I don't know, that's what I was taught in my little thing. I will make sure mine is off. Anything that we need? Anybody have to? Okay. I won't make any like predictions about how, but hopefully, that will be good. We've got some great presentations though today as well. So again, welcome to the Education Committee meeting on February 11th, 2019. And we'll begin with our Assistant Superintendent Jeff Hortons report.
I need just 1 second. I'm just transitioning back from an off-site meeting, so I'm just bringing up my stuff.
And I think that's fine. We're all just kind of transitioning and getting our notes and our books open. Just an overview of where we're going tonight. We have our Assistant Superintendent's report, and then we will go to Curriculum Director Gail Netland's report. We have, I will not review our grant applications for us. It's in our board book. There's 3 of them. I think that I'm going to turn it back to Assistant Superintendent when we look at our policies. There's a chunk of them, and I don't know if, there's going to be any real, need or questions about it, but that's a bulk of our meeting tonight is kind of looking at those policy updates. We just then go to a extended field trip leave, and that's pretty much, we don't even really need to look at it. You can look in your board book, but we'll be approving that on Tuesday. We've got about 9 diplomas to announce on Tuesday, and those are in yours as well. So really, as we look at our night together, it's our reports and it's our CTE presentation and a look at some policies that we're looking to move towards.
All right. So as always, I start off with my site celebrations, and for this month, I want to note Lincoln Middle School. A big focus of our school this year has been reduction of suspensions and expulsions, and Lincoln has done just an amazing job in turning that around in a short period of time, and that's not something that's easy to do. I mean, it takes a lot of hard work and dedication to do that. And just to give you an example of some of the data that we're seeing right now, and I'll break it down kind of by month, but in 17-18, Lincoln Middle School had 30 out-of-school suspensions. In September, this year they had 3. In the month of October, in 17-18, they had 68. This year they had 23. In the month of November, last year they had 89. This year they have 25. In December of last year they had 89. And this December they have 18. So I think just in terms of site celebrations and really being aligned to some of the work that we're trying to do as a district, and just a huge shout out to their staff who's working extremely hard, all the partners that are involved in that process, and their leadership team. Just absolutely awesome just to see that happening. So awesome job over at Lincoln. Just wanted to recognize them for a site celebration. Moving on to our walkthroughs. So we do walkthroughs through our different sites. We tend to do one every week or 2 weeks or so. With some of the snow days and stuff, we only ended up with 1 this year. And that was at Laura MacArthur. And we saw a lot of great things there. We shared that with, and we shared that information back with their CIT members and their principal. One thing that we ask our our principals to do with their CITs is develop a practice profile. So when we come to a site, we have, usually it's a form, it might be a Google Doc or it could be in different ways, but we visit a classroom and say, here's the things that you should see in every class that look consistent. And so different sites have worked on different pieces of that, and over at Laura Mac, some different things that they're looking at is how is the class interacting, their classroom environment, and program management, monitoring the tone of voice. Are we like a 1, a 2, a 3, or 4? What is that voice level? When teachers are using the microphone systems, the audio systems, what does that look like? And so we do some learning and conversation around that. Student engagement and instruction, students being on task, reading. And then after we do these tools, we come out, we do a walk through the class, and we come out, we do a little debrief in the hallway, and we have a discussion with the principal about that, and we kind of talk about what we saw, and we really use that practice profile to guide our work, which was developed by our CITs and our building leadership. So it's a great way for us to have a conversation about them working on things that they've identified that they need to be working on through the CIT process, and then for us to offer some feedback. And then at the end, we have a conversation just about the entire visit. But seeing some great things over at Lower Mac was really exciting to see. We engaged in some great conversations around how they're supporting students who need that second scoop of needs, both academically and behaviorally. And so there's some great strategies that they're coming up with and have some future thoughts to continue conversations on. Some highlights that I just want to point out is I had a chance to go out to the Steve O'Neill building and meet with their staff, which was really exciting. I also went out to Center City Housing. And so we had some really great conversations about how they're programming, how we're programming, how we just continue to support each other in that process. And we're going to continue to engage in that process to make sure that we're really doing the most amount we can for kids the most effectively. And some things we started talking about is when are we offering those services? And so they said, when are you offering services as a school district or through the community partners? And they're saying, well, when are we offering those, and why would we offer those at the same time? Maybe we need to coordinate a little bit with that so students have support for longer periods of time throughout the day based on when they're available to get that. So a little bit more of that on-demand approach to learning. And as parents are available or unavailable or unable to support with homework needs, maybe Steve O'Neill can support with that when the school district or our school collaborative at Myers-Wilkins maybe is not offering some support. So the YMCA is not offering some support. So some exciting conversations there. We also had a meeting for our suspension and expulsion team. And so this is the team that we're working with. This came out of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights work. And so we had a meeting the other day to talk about where are we going to go as a group? It was on one of our cold nights, and our attendance was not as great as we had hoped, but we still had some community members that fought the cold and got there, and we had some nice conversations about how we're continuing to work on suspension and expulsion. We were seeing some nice things out at Lincoln already, but we want to continue those efforts until, it'd be great if I won't say what I would love to get to, but to reduce those is to the best that we can. Lastly, I wanted to share about Alice Parent Nights. So we've been doing a lot of work around Alice. We're getting ready to run our first drill, actually, with all of our students. And so, look at you. You are just top-notch. I love it. This is a book called I'm Not Scared, I'm Prepared. And this is a book we're actually using with our elementary students. So our elementary teachers will have this book to help teach the book about students. And so it tells the story of an ant, and they talk about how they're going to go about teaching that. And they have, in here, they have the wolf, who is the bad person, they have the shepherd, and they have the sheep. Now, we all are very aware that some of our community partners and some of our students might be part of the wolf clan. And so we had a conversation about that. What does it mean to teach about the wolf inside our curriculum? And I was able to partner with William House to give teachers some guidance around this and how to be sensitive about that, and how we don't want to always be trained the wolf as a bad character, but also a positive character in other pieces. So we're asking teachers that when they are talking about these different characters, that they find some literature that shows wolves in a positive light, because in the wolf clan they see that as a source of pride, and we want to make sure that we honor that. So even though in this story we might depict the wolf as a character who is not positive, we want to make sure that we come back and show them in a positive light and be sensitive to that. But this book does a nice job of showing how to kind of go about Alice for younger students, our pre-K, K students, grade 2, grade 3, and throughout most of our elementaries. So we'll be rolling that out along with some other PowerPoints that our safety team has developed. And that's going to be going here in the next week to just after break. That's kind of the span in which we're doing that. We sent out a communication. We did an all district blast to parents. We also link this in some of our other district communications, and parents the principals put communication in their newsletters. And in addition to that, we said, parents still might have questions. We really wanted to try to get out as much as we could, but we offered an Alice Parent Night. And so we paired this with 8th grade orientation over at Denfield and in East. And so a team went to each site, and we offered a session before and a session after. There were roughly 25 parents or so who attended all the sessions, who came and learned about Alice. We took them through a PowerPoint. We answered questions. The feedback overall on Alice has been very positive. They've been very appreciative for that, and they appreciated the parent night. They also appreciated the communication. They thought we had pretty solid communication around this. Currently on our website under Safe and Welcoming Schools, you can find a PowerPoint on Alice, which will take you through all the different pieces of that. We also have a summary of the letter up there, and a link to the Alice webpage where if parents do want to have this book, they can go and order that themselves. And we also have a frequently asked questions section, so if parents want to have conversations with their students, it offers a little bit of guidance on that parent choice to decide if this is appropriate things to talk about at home or not, and they can choose to do that. And we really emphasize that's a parent decision, that they know their child best. So those are some highlights. And the last thing I want to share is a little shout out. So Miss Whitmer's Graves over at Cte Month Elementary School, I was out there, and I try to get out to each of the sites at least once a month to visit with the principals and then spend some time talking to them about continuous improvement, to spend some time talking about what their needs are, and to talk about, and maybe to tour the school and, just problem solve and be connected in those buildings. So I really try to dedicate a lot of time to that, and I'm going to pull up on my phone right now because I don't want to make a mistake, but I took a picture. I was so impressed when I walked into her room and saw this up on the wall, and I said, "Can I share this at the board meeting?" She said, "Absolutely, that'd be great." So on her wall, really big across the whole, there's these big posters. Each one is about like this big, and on it says, "Remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create." And what she's talking about Bloom's taxonomy, absolutely. And she actually has her students at the level where they look up there and they actually, within themselves, start differentiating curriculum and picking out their own understanding level and saying, "Hey, I'm going to move from this area to this area." And I'm just, how amazing is that we have that present in front of elementary students and they're able to take a look at that and to do that work. And so I asked her what those conversations look like with students, and she gave me some examples, and just really exciting work happening over there at Piedmont, and I just really wanted to recognize that. So really beautiful, and within each poster she has, what does it mean? How are we to analyze is to question stuff, to compare and contrast, to sort, to investigate, to categorize, to infer. I mean, she breaks it down, and she's clearly taught the vocabulary to the students, and this is, some of those words are, those are big vocabulary words, and for students to be able to understand that at a meaningful level was just really exciting. So anyway, shout out to her, and that is my assistant superintendent report.
Member Sandstead.
Yeah, I attended an Alice Parent Night meeting, and so picked up the book and was supposed to return it to you. So there you go. But it was informative. I got the impression that we're still developing exactly how it's going to be implemented, the training or the drills are going to be implemented in K2. And I think that parents of early elementary students would really appreciate knowing what those will look like for their kids ahead of time once that's finalized. So that's just my feedback.
Yep. Thank you very much for that. Just and some feedback on that is you are right that we do have a plan in terms of doing. We're going to do an enhanced lockdown at this first one, which is a small step forward. Then we'll do a counter. Then we'll do a counter and evacuate drill in May when the weather's a little bit warmer. I heard in Duluth the snow melts around May 15th or May 20th, so we figured the last couple weeks of school maybe we can do the evacuation thing. But yeah, we want to continue to have some conversations on that. We thought, should we just develop everything right away, or should we kind of wait? And we thought, let's just do it kind of on a drill-by-drill basis, because we want to get feedback from some of our teachers and kind of get a sense of how things are going. So absolutely, we'll continue to communicate around that and provide that out in advance so everybody has what they need for each of the trainings. So thank you for that. And thank you for attending. I really appreciate that. And returning the book.
Member Loeffler-Kemp?
Yep. I am wondering, are you, for the high school students at Easton, Denfeld, and here at ALC, any kind of specific training for them because they're just at a different comprehensive understanding and awareness and, yeah.
Absolutely. So at the we divided up 2 trainings. One is going to be a pre-K 3, and the other one is going to be a 4 through 12. And then with each of them, we have some different things that we allow and we'll teach at certain levels and not others. For example, counter can look very different. And so when people first hear the word counter, they might think of trying to subdue an attacker. And you know what? That is a personal choice, and that is part of Alice training. And for a group of seniors who feel like that's a choice they want to make, then that's an option that'd be available to them. But it's not. That's a last resort. That is something we'll train around, and that's a choice. And that is not the choice for everybody. We would not do that with our elementary students. In fact, in elementary together, we don't teach that technique, and so we call it swarm. And we don't teach that technique to elementary. And so we do differentiate to make some things age appropriate. With the book and with the younger students, we're saying, really follow the shepherd, follow your teacher. They are your guide through that process. With our older students, we give them a little bit more individual choice, and we'll practice those individual choices as well. So, truth be told, I pray that we never end up in a situation where we ever even have to execute this, but we don't truly know how we're going to respond until we're there. We can train, and we do everything we can to prepare, and we want to make sure that people just know they have choices, and depending how they choose to respond in that's their choice, and they can move forward with that. And so the older they get, they'll get a little bit more choice with that. Where, like in early childhood family education, we're going to rely on parents in a situation like that, or the teacher in the elementary grades.
Thank you. Seeing no other mics on, we'll just move on then. Thank you again, Assistant Superintendent. Actually, who goes with you when you go to your walkthroughs at Laura MacArthur? Is there a team, and who's that typically?
Yep.
Well, I'm sure it changes from month.
So generally, the Director of Curriculum Instruction, Director of Assessment, myself, and Superintendent will attend those. There may be a conflict at certain times where not all of us might be able to attend, but we all generally try to get there to the best of our ability to do those walkthroughs.
Now you're done. Now you're off now. Curriculum Director Netlin can turn her mic on, and next is her report. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So up first, I have just an update on registration. It's been open for a little bit now, and we've still got 2 more weeks, so we're kind of right in the middle of that work. Just a reminder about that there is information available on the website and our Facebook page, and also counselors have information too with that. But so that is ongoing currently. And we have the break coming up for students, but just know that the window is open that first day back too, so they have some extra time if they forget things or need to turn something in. Next up, Immersion. We talked quite a bit about Immersion last month. We had a family night, and that was well attended. And we had kicked out the idea of maybe visiting a school, and perfect timing. One of our programs actually was wanting to visit a school and had a personal connection, and we were able to already have a visit happen. So they were looking at, focused mostly on level literacy materials and talking about assessments and doing that. Because we have, at Mesabecon, our instruction is in Ojibwe, there aren't a lot of materials already available, as you know. And so trying to figure out how best to create things and share resources was kind of the main focus of that. But they were able to start building some relationships with a school that already is bridging into the middle school age level in the cities. So it's a school that's both in Dakota language and Ojibwe, and they're up through 7th grade currently. Bidote is the name of the school. In the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, I believe. I can send you the information if you want. So that was really exciting, and we're in the middle of doing just some ongoing troubleshooting and planning thinking forward, since Ms. Sabaicon is in grade 4 currently for us, so we need to be thinking about those upcoming grade levels. Then lastly, just some updates with as far as curriculum. So secondary ELA text adoption, since I wrote this last week, the books are actually in. So we're working on cataloging those and getting them out to sites. That should be out by the middle of this week. And then unit design, Jeff mentioned some of our weather we've had lately, and so we are on reschedule number 2. So this is our 3rd attempt at doing our PD, which is this week for that. No, it's not tomorrow. I know, I looked at the weather and thought, oh my word, we should be okay for Wednesday. So that hasn't happened. That will be happening on Wednesday. And then with more planned for this summer in June. And then it was alluded to already in the agenda, but CTE, will hear an update from them tonight. And then just kind of as a heads up for March, music requested to be on the agenda. So that's coming up. And then April will be art. And those are because we've got some adoption curriculum standards work going on with them. So they'd like to share with you what they've been working on. And that is all I have.
Member Sandsted.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to start with Immersion. Came up talking with folks last week at Lowell. Do we have the ability for students who are in Massabiquang to engage or be serviced through E-squared? Is it E-squared that we call our...
Oh, enrichment and extension?
Yes.
You know what? I can look into that specifically. I would think so, but I am not 100% certain, so I will write that down as a question.
Yeah, I think that that's pretty important given that sure. I think, the population who have self-selected into these immersion programs are conscientious of things like that.
Sure.
Yeah. Then a question about the language arts curriculum. Do we have any plans at this point for looking beyond the single book change with the rest of the curriculum?
For the content area? Is that what you're asking? Or
yeah, for the rest of the curriculum that's offered for 9th grade language arts.
Like doing a larger revision for the whole course?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Not at this time. That would fall within the adoption pacing schedule.
And so it's on a schedule somewhere?
So our district schedule follows the state standards review and adoption cycle. And so once they're reviewed, we just had this conversation today. Once they're reviewed, then there's kind of a year or 2 lag as far as when we're reviewing them, looking at materials, and then making an adoption and a recommendation for implementation.
Can you let us know where the English language arts state standard revision is on the schedule?
What year it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I read Spirit Car, and I'm really glad we have hard copies because I read it on Kindle, and you didn't get to the family tree until the end, and it would be really helpful while you're reading it throughout.
Absolutely.
Member Oswald.
I just wanted to follow up about Huck Finn, if that is actually going to be replaced in the future rather than just being deleted. Is there going to be another selection added, and are you going to seek input from teachers on how to revise how we chose Spirit Car to replace Huck Finn, and how that process worked? Because I understand that the teachers are not happy with how the process was to replace To Kill a Mockingbird. So I'm just wondering if it's going to be looked at as improving the process of how you pick the next book for Huck Finn. That would be where Huck Finn was.
So 2 parts.
Kind of, yeah.
So as far as Huck Finn goes, yes, that has taken a backseat to the To Kill a Mockingbird because of timing and because it's a text that wasn't used widely in the district since it was a choice option within a larger list. And so for this year, we're still asking people to choose 3 texts out of 5 instead of 6. So we're looking at adding another title to that choice options for 11th grade, but doing it in time for next school year.
Right. And so I'm just asking if the process to to add another text to 6 text is going to look different with some input from teachers, or if you're going to go about it the way that Spirit Car was chosen.
So the process will remain the same, and I will clarify with teachers were at the heart of the process. Also community members were actively involved, parents, teachers, and students. Did I get community, parents, teachers, students? Yes. So teachers were the primary source of listing titles to recommend for that, and then narrowing it down into the finalists. And then so we seek input from the other stakeholder groups on those finalist titles, and that process will remain the same.
I just want to thank you for that clarification too, because I think that there is an assumption that teachers weren't included, and I am very personally connected to teachers in the English department in both schools, and there are teachers that looked at all books and gave you feedback on all of them. There's really, most of the time, there's 2 English 9 teachers in each building, at least in the high school. So, you really want input from the 4 English teachers that are directly connected to the 9th grade and where they lay with their reading abilities and what will be interesting. And when I share with my colleagues, they had input and, they had some ideas, but they're going forward with the identity theme, which they really do like and love and can apply. And Spirit Car I've read as well. Thank you. I'd like to call Brad Veith, and thank you for delaying your report too for a good hour. So come on up and give us some great feedback. I think most of us have your PowerPoint in our board book and have looked at it. And
yes, I will not be going through it line by line. That's for you to go through.
Well, I appreciated the red and the cap. You encapsulated
yes.
some issues at the bottom of all your presentations, which helps clarify what we as a board want to focus on as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and that was kind of the point of the whole thing. So you all know me. I'm Brad Veith. I'm the vocational programs coordinator and the administrator for all career and tech ed. And so part of the reason of coming in February is it's National Cte Month. And so anyone who's on social media know that I've kind of been hogging it since February 1st, and will continue until February 28th. So part of this was, we started when I first got here, was just using this as my annual time, because it's also part of Perkins. Our board bylaws for the Perkins grant that we federally manage is that I go to every school board and present. So all the other members I go in August and September, but I save Duluth for February and CTE. So a bulk of what I'm going to show tonight, we're going to really just focus on kind of those first 3 pages that I included in the document, kind of the quick hitter handout that looks kind of like this. And so with the large packet, it purely is informational. It's me giving you the goods and the bads and some of the things that you might not see with the breadth of programming we offer in the district. And so as a board, it's a driving force, and there's a lot of different issues in the district, and so it's just my one chance to let you know, hey, here's kind of my opinion on what we're seeing in the district as far as career and tech ed goes. So I hope at some point you look through it and help you decide where you're at on some of these stances as budgets and everything else comes through. So overall, I'm going to start kind of on the blue side up here where it talks about, it won't let me zoom in on this one, the enrollment data. Up in the top right-hand corner. The good news is, within the last year, we're up 500 enrollments, and then 250 of those are individual heads, so individual kids that are in there, because they are 2 different things, because we have a lot of kids that take multiple. Now, I will note that it's great. It's a good number to see, but a bulk of it is us cleaning up some reporting when I did kind of program approvals and some other stuff I did. A bulk of it is work-based learning in the special ed department and at the ALC. So we did go up in our general programming as well, but it's not like we had a ton of kids signing up for the programs at the classes. It was a mixed number, so wanted to point that out. You'll also notice then on the page where it says programs of study, This you'll see where numbers show up as zeros and then turn into big numbers and some shifts. That really was me cleaning up the program approvals. So what I have to do for Career and Tech Ed every 5 years, so this was my first go around of it since Jim Art retired, is submit all the paperwork that says here's our programs of study. We can't just offer classes randomly. They have to be approved. We have to have a licensed teacher. They have to be sequential. And so that process I did over the last 9 months and submitted last fall. And so that's why you see some of the different shifts. Some of the changes are enrollment growth. We are seeing growth in our CAD programs and our manufacturing programs with the addition of the Fab Lab at Denfeld, and a lot of growth at East in those courses. And so we've also seen a big increase in the culinary program at Denfeld as far as that. So those are definitely for you to look at and see. And then I included the staff because I think it's good knowing who's doing this because they are running around like mad. So other things that we've done. Last year we were able to bring back child development as part of the pre-education program, and although Pathways to Teaching doesn't show up because it's not a Career and Tech Ed class currently, it still ties into that pre-education career route, and so the early childhood, child development classes are ones that tie into both, and so when we registered at East we got kids looking at that as well. So the big data points on the left where it kind of has all the red and green, here's how you kind of read that. Is the red and green is our consortium, so that includes all of our districts, including all the way up to Cook County. We're combined into one data point. And then the three little ones is our 3-year average as Duluth Public Schools. And so ones I was most impressed with is you start looking at our MCA scores are still low compared to the state average for our Career and Tech Ed kids, but that's one of trying to help where we can and what we can do. There's not a ton we can do, but it is one when you start looking at especially the graduation rates and the on-time graduation for Career and Tech Ed kids. I know I point that out every year, but last year's single-year graduation was 94%, and you look at our demographics later in that document of the kids that we're serving and the students we have, that's a good percentage. Our Career and Tech Ed graduation rates for kids who take 2 or more classes is still 10 percentage points higher than the district average. And again, that's with high special ed enrollments and different protected populations we have. So it does help show some of those parts of Career and Tech Ed. The other highlight I enjoyed seeing was if you go to the right side for some of our performance is our students of color, which has been my target population of trying to get more students of color in. We were up to 252 students last year, and that's up from 185 the previous year. So that's a pretty good jump. Most of those increases come from our American Indian and African American population, which is the two groups that I've been trying to connect with as much and get role modeling and guest speakers in and showing that. So that's starting to pay off. Non-trad, which under Career and Tech Ed is solely by gender until this year, but when I reported this out, it was just gender, so that's girls taking some of our classes like shop and some of those other engineering courses, and also males taking our health occupation. We were up to about 35% of our population was non-trad, which is way above what we were a few years ago. We were in the single digits a few years ago. And for me, the other key is that 27% of those now are concentrating, which means they're taking 2 or more classes in an area. And that's the big one. So now they're not only trying it, they're liking it. And so one you see of that, you saw in the news a little bit during the press, was our female welding that we're doing right now. We've done it at Denfeld the last 2 years. We moved it to LSC to give them a more robust experience. And so we have 11 females from the region, juniors and seniors, that are lighting it up every Wednesday night and having a great time with their female mentors. So feel free to stop down there. We have 5 Duluth students, and then we have 6 Duluth students now. 1 started last week. And then 5 are coming from 2 Harbors, Superior, and Proctor. They're driving down and doing that. That's been great because our industry partners have paid for it all. They pay, Alltech actually pays the mentor's hourly rate to come in and for her to come in. LSC is giving us the facility for free. And then industry has paid for all of the donated materials, supplies, welding jackets, and everything for the females to take home. So it's been a great model of how to get some non-trad participation. So when it actually goes into the programs and later in the document, I won't go in there. It's one of understanding what the district's financially on the table for. One thing with Career and Tech Ed is, as you start looking at budgets, is 35% is levy eligible for staffing, supplies, and travel. And this year we even put some of our club stipends into those accounts to help defray the costs. Now, as a district, the choice then is, what does that 35% justify? And I've met with Superintendent Gronseth several times on this too, and with our CFOs at times. Some school districts say that's what justifies smaller class sizes. Some, that's what they use to say, hey, we can provide the extra capital improvements and some of those things long term. It's general fund money. It's one where it just helps alleviate some of those costs. There has been discussion at the state level, for those of you that like to get involved in the political side, of raising that ratio. I've heard upwards of 60 to 70%, which would definitely help our district on being able to afford those CTE programs, because they are smaller classes, they do cost more, and so there's at least those discussions.
Can I ask a quick question there?
Yeah, I don't care, sure.
So you've got it phrased at, we have the option of levying 35%.
Yes.
Are we levying 35%?
Yes, we have gotten to that point now where we've been able to clear up things and get things tracked and get teachers properly licensed, where all of our CTE programs currently are taking that 35%.
Thanks.
Yep. The other funding source comes from, and you hear me mention all the times and it's thrown out, is Perkins. Perkins is a federal grant. It's given to the state and then broken down into a consortium. The biggest thing is understanding that the Perkins money is not Duluth Public School money. It's the consortiums. We are the biggest entity in that region, and we do really take advantage of it. And so really everything you see on that third page is things that Perkins paid for last year as far as clubs, PD, travel, helping our most rigorous programs like automotive and our healthcare program. It does provide a lot of money. One thing I wanted to reference here, especially with you looking at policies later, is Perkins 5 was signed by President Trump this summer, and it changed the whole purpose of Perkins. And it really is that non-trad, getting exposure, getting to protected populations. So when you look at that policy 535 tonight with how are we guiding students, how are we counseling, what materials, those are things Perkins now is being tasked with. It's also meant to help pilot new programs we can't justify. Aerospace physics a few years ago, Perkins paid for all of that equipment and supplies and is still paying for that growth. It's not a long-term fix, but it allows us to get it going. So that's as we talk about programs of how do we expand programs or change programs, that's where Perkins comes in. It's not for us to use on staff unless it's new staff. So that's the thing we cleaned up lately. Otherwise, as far as the district goes, we've done a great job matching FTE to need. The biggest issues that you'll see me list several times in there is perception. The district struggles with class size perception. And in CTE, it is a big one because what's best practices in a CTE class doesn't match what some other staff have to realize and work with in their programs. So we do supplement with tech tutors and other support staff. But that's just a perception thing on the district and us trying to make that work. And so that gets to be a struggle quite a bit because those of you that have gone on tours with me see some very big classes, but they're not nearly as big as the core areas. And so it's just having those discussions. Other than that, my only major concerns for the district is really our programs are well funded, well equipped, but our medical occupations program has not been updated since pre-red plan. So both, if you walk into those medical labs, look good on the surface, but they're really outdated. And the beds and the simulated labs, we're just nowhere near what we need to be there. But the rest of them I feel okay with. My other long-term ones is technology can never keep up. We purchased a lot for new computers a few years ago for engineering, but that's already been 4 years, and I worry with the limited technology budget, what happens when those have to go out again in about 4 years. And that was a good chunk of money when we invested last year or last time. So that's on my other end. Otherwise, successes, because those are always way more fun. It was a phenomenal year if you look through the highlights on that page of industry connections of kids coming out, going out, and industries coming in. We have kids doing manufacturing internships and architecture internships this year. All Tech donated $30,000 to put metal milling to both sites, and they're looking at maybe doing even more in the future. I'm working with another employer right now about maybe $35,000 or so to get welding at East because they don't have that capability right now. Ellis is giving us welding equipment for free. So at least we can let kids try it. But those have been key. the industry in Duluth has really been stepping up. Assistant Superintendent Horton asked me to give you some information on Construct Tomorrow, which is coming up, and so I'll pass these two around. The big one for the board would be February 26th at 10 is usually the big press time. This time we're doing it more as a walking tour so people can meet with the media and go as they wish. We definitely invite all board members to that. The 26th is just Duluth students. All of our sophomores go that day from Denfeld and East. And it's a great hands-on event. The second one I'm handing out is what we call the Construction Career Open House, and that's something with my work with the Workforce Board, Indeed, is it's meant to be a community event where anyone looking to try to get into the trades is a chance to walk around, see what they do, and even sign those papers and look at when they enroll. I also take students on the 27th that are juniors and seniors. Both East and Denfeld Career Centers take vans or a bus for now those kids that have kind of rethought about it and said maybe I should look at it again. So we take any kid that is interested that day to go talk to any union they want. So overall, successes, if you've been in the labs, the students seem to be more focused and working hard. The staff feel supported and really do seem to be buying into what we're doing and making some of those changes, even though they're hard. I think you said it best, change is hard. And so I'm really excited for what the next year could bring. And that's where I end it with you folks. You know, I think really from the board and what I would love to hear long term over the next year is what's next for us. You know, what does career and tech ed look like in Duluth? The one thing, you know, is matching that workforce and making some of those changes that sometimes programs that have been around, if they're not matching a workforce need, do we continue to do those or do we start to match the workforce? We're never going to be as fluid as the workforce. That's not sustainable. I wish it was. But, you know, I think those conversations need to happen of expanding things, eliminating some or modifying some if there's not those needs. Because you hear cybersecurity, you hear internship programs and all these things that we can do. I think it's just having a priority from the district level of what we want to do moving forward. They're all pretty and they're all nice, but do they fit us and do they fit our needs? So other than that, I'd open it up to you to let me know what you want to know.
Member Oswald.
Thank you. I notice under the list of key issues to remember, the second bullet point on page 14 is need to plan long-term for larger facilities needs.
Yes.
Are you outgrowing your spaces within the schools, and what is your vision that you're thinking of facility needs?
With that one, it's one of, on the East Campus, there's one, you know, we have the engineering lab there. That also houses our aerospace physics for part of the year. It also houses our construction program if they're not building outside. And that program has gone from 2 classes to a potential full-time FTE by the next year. And it's one lab. And so it's just that matter of figuring out where East doesn't have a lot of flexibility necessarily to shift some of those around. And so I was there this morning even as we were looking going, if we put in welding, if we put in some of these things that are nice, is how do we make it all fit? And it's somewhere also our larger class sizes. Our biggest limiting factor for a lot of our classes is the student to teacher ratio and the lab size. A lot of the labs that were built after the red plan were built probably to their minimum square footage or to what the class sizes were supposed to be. And so when you start cramming in 25 to 35 kids in our graphics lab, let's say, it's built for 12 to 18. And so when you build a lab that way and now you're trying to staff it and house it a different way, it just makes it a crunch. And so that's where just looking at those of limit class size or facility. I don't think facility is feasibility, you know, right now in some areas, but I just wanted to put that out as that is the constant battle of where do we put people as they grow. On the Denfeld end, the facilities themselves aren't as stretched. It's more better utilization of those facilities. Except for medical, yes. Yeah. The medical programs, the culinary programs were not designed well. You know, both culinary programs have 4 rooms or 3 rooms that are all about 50 yards apart and the teacher runs. And so, you know, it's just a matter of those, they make it work. It's a matter of how do we make that work. And we have extra tech tutors and staffing because of that, because we can't monitor 2 rooms or 3 rooms and some of those things. So there's just logistics part. The East Campus and the middle schools on the east side would be where definitely the physical space doesn't match the class size that we try to put in there.
So how far in the future are you looking that you will max your capacity?
I'm a very inventive person. We kind of maxed it just by the size of our classes we allow, and right now I would say we're not. A few years ago we were saying no to kids because we wouldn't expand. Right now we haven't hit that point the last year or two. But it's just a tight fit with those class sizes. The problem we face most of the time is that in between interest, where you do have enough for a full class at a decent size, but then not enough to offer that second one. And so then your choice is, do you not allow kids access, or do you make the class a little bigger and try to find a way to make it work? And we've usually gone the latter. We've gone bigger and then tried to find a tech tutor or something to help.
I'm glad we're not turning kids away.
We are trying our best, yeah.
So knowing that planning, it takes years and it moves at a snail's pace in systems such as ours, what stage of planning are we at for the direction that you want to go with the program? I mean, is this the beginning stages of how it's going? Is there a plan that we're not aware of happening? Because space and materials and facilities can't just pop out of nowhere. That takes a lot of planning. So knowing we have a lack of foresight in planning these kinds of things previously, I would really like to be on the ball and like to know what's happening.
And that was part of my theme of tonight, is at least bringing the discussion, because you look at where CTE was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was all dying and we were all going to college. You know, it's a quick shift. That's where we can't ever match to, is finding that balance of, you know, when I was still teaching CTE, you know, they were basically telling us if you're not doing a college test or something college related, you're just killing time for kids. And now it's not the case anymore. You know, people are seeing the options and seeing the ways kids can go and what they can do with it. To me, I think we need to have the conversation. There is no planning. I am reaching out to employers, and I'm having to hold them back sometimes because I'm like, I'm not sure if we can do what you want to do yet, but at least the conversations are starting.
Okay, I look forward to hearing more.
Member Lafleur-Kim.
Yeah, Brad, you are right. I mean, I think of some of the first years I was on the board and your report, and just the growth of the program, the diversity of the program. It's been fun to go out and see the welding. And I was door knocking this fall, and I ran into 2 high school students who were in their garages under a car, and they were in the program, and just kind of from hearing from their perspective. So I just really wanted to thank you for what you have done with all the programs that run under this, and appreciate the really excellent presentation and the background materials. I'm looking forward to going to the Construct Day, and I really, is this the second year that you've done the parent night?
This would be the 3rd year.
Or the 3rd?
Yeah.
How is this getting out to parents through our schools, just about both the day that, the opportunity for the kids to go out, but also the evening piece?
It's one where, because this is the career night's not tied through Duluth or tied through the public school system. It's through deed and workforce, and so the committee that we organize all of it. We've been trying to find. We had some late money from deed to try. Okay. It's always that, trying to figure out the spending sources in all of these programs. And when you hear it from music and art and the rest, marketing materials is the most difficult thing to get in general. And so for that event, for Construct Tomorrow, the rest, it's kind of been word of mouth. We created a Facebook page and pushed that out. As far as me, I go out for our day, and I presented to all 3 grades at Denfeld, and we're trying to organize one at East, but the snow days and cold days have kind of messed that up too. For sure to the sophomores, to pre-teach a little bit and let them know why they're going, because there is that perception that people just don't understand what those careers are. And, and I'll say right now, regionally, with Can of Worms, Essentia, Downtown Project, the contractors are terrified that they're not going to find enough skilled work, because they're going to have to bring it in because we just don't have enough supply in the region to do these large build projects. So we've got a very willing audience if we're willing to meet up with that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I look forward to lobbying with you next week. I think we're gonna lobby on this, right?
Yep.
Again, too, I just want to thank you as well as someone who's been in the district. We've, you were the right man for the hire. I thank you for your passion and your incredible skill to have brought us this far. And isn't this your 5th year with us? 4th year?
Fourth. It feels like longer, doesn't it?
Well, because I know we both spoke at the TED Talk night that we were in. That was your 1st year, so I was trying to figure out when that was. But for 4 years, and again, I think that you're right, Member Oswald. We've got to, as a board, my challenge to us is, Mr. Veith asked us, what is our, where are we as a board pushing, envisioning, and understand? We can have other conversations and work sessions and listening sessions to see, what we as a board can work with our budget and our administration and look at, because we all understand this, that career and tech ed is engaged by Duluth community, business community, construction community, union community a lot. Like they are incredibly giving for our programs right now with supplies and money, and they're like I said, they're scared that they're not going to have the workforce with what's coming ahead in the next 5 to 10 years in Duluth. So we as a board also have to be visionary and give them direction as to what we want. Because we all talk about career and tech ed. It's in the papers, it's in the national news, it's forefront in Superintendent Gronseth's State of the School. And we do hang our hat on some really great opportunities for CTE. There are rural schools around us that can't offer it. So we can certainly be more, proactive in sharing with our community that they might want to enroll their students in our school district so they can partake in this. But I also know that some CTEs are open to other districts to bring students to, right?
Yes, we do. We do have tuition reimbursement and some other things. It's a small number. Hermantown does it the most. I've also gone the route as I'll never poach another program. So if Hermantown has a great metals program, I'm not going to talk to their counselors about our metals program. Right. But we do offer that. To me, that's where I talk about utilization of space. When you were talking about that, is I do see an asset at Denfeld where you have labs that are open, and how do we market that to do cohorts from other districts? Not the STC, but you have a chance there where you could use some of those spaces and provide, and getting inventive with LSC. The goal is to get the kids into the workforce as fast as possible. To get them to where they need to go. And that's been my driving force, even with my staff. My staff, you'll look when we cut a lot of courses or eliminated. It wasn't that we eliminated courses, is we were being honest with what we were honestly offering. It doesn't look as impressive, but those were all classes that weren't being offered, and we've combined when we can. We're not going to have a kid for 4 years. We got to do it in 2. We got to get it done faster. So.
And I appreciate listing our staff that are teaching as well, so that we're aware of who they are. And again, thank you for making sure that we are following state statute with teachers that can teach those classes. They're not easy to find. We maybe could grow STE a little bit, but sometimes getting those key people to teach those courses is also a challenge. So I appreciate. And
we've been blessed. It's the difference too of, you look at our recent hires, and almost all of them come from industry. They're a great group of trained workforce that want to come back and help. Our new engineering teacher is doing phenomenal work. Our new culinary teacher, our new,
automotive.
They're giving that. They're willing to take the pay cut and take on the stress. But they are, and I mean, it's been mine, and but they do take support. My staff is phenomenal. I mean, we have a great staff.
Because the rewards are so great to see a student that somewhat maybe didn't enjoy school as much find the right career tech class, and all of a sudden they attend and they succeed in there.
Mine is, it's one great MTSS strategy, and the data shows what the groups are doing. That's, to me, as a board directive, it's a pretty non-obtrusive that the kids want to stay in school and graduate because they're connected to something they understand.
Thank you. Superintendent Gronseth. I guess I'll let you have a word.
Thank you. Our CTE program has been growing. It has been a focus of ours for the past, 4, 5, 6 years. That is much to the credit of Brad Veith's, whose undying energy and ability to be creative with problem solving, but also to build those relationships with industry, with are with Lake Superior College and others to make sure that our kids are getting the most out of those programs that they can. I know that you have a number of advisory councils that you work with on a regular basis, and I know the hours and the dedication that you put in. I know that this is an area across the state that all school districts are looking at, and they very often look at Duluth as a model for their programs. One of the things that it takes, things like aerospace physics, that partners with our community-specific needs, but there is also an investment in staff time and our curriculum department, the reductions that we've made in our curriculum department. Aaron Salmala was key in writing the course description and working with our community partners and developing and aligning the standards to what happens in that course are investments that we need to look at. One of the things that we had hoped to do was a biomedical chemistry course that took the chemistry standards and worked with our medical health occupations program to pair those. Physics and chemistry being the science requirements. This was a way to build that into our CTE programs, and to be able to do that, we have to look at reinvesting in our curriculum department to be able to develop those courses. And so it's all kind of works together, because I know that the work that we had done or hoped to do on the biomed course has kind of taken a back seat because we don't have enough staff in place to be doing that work. And so those are all part of that long-term conversation about what does it really take to move this forward. What does it take to develop a new course, to align with required standards, to allow those programs to grow and become not an add-on or something that's in addition to the requirements, but really changes the flavor of those requirements to each of these departments so that kids can build their own path to graduation while still meeting the required standards. And that's really the direction that I'd like us to see us move into in developing those clear pathways to graduation while building in the standard requirements.
And we've been working to bridge some of those gaps. I've been working with some of the middle school math teachers, looking at how do we do computational thinking and not cybersecurity, but computer science. It's very algebraic as you start working it through, and so trying to provide supports to them. That's where I've kind of taken the role of my job isn't CTE director, it's vocational programs coordinator, and so me reaching out to those core other areas for those that are willing to say how do we tie in. And getting those work experiences and those speakers in. And so we're getting more. We're starting to see the connection a little more, but it's in its infancy.
Superintendent, Assistant Superintendent Hortons.
I just want to add just kind of the wow factor, just kind of echo what Superintendent Gronseth said, that when I originally started in the district about 7 months ago, Superintendent Gronseth brought me around to do some site visits, and I was just amazed at some of the things, and then I had a chance to meet one-on-one with Mr. Beets over the summer, and I said, we do what? And we do what? How do I get a reservation over there at that restaurant? And still haven't been there yet. I'm on the wait list, I think, so it's been about 7 months or so. He hasn't invited me to go out to dinner with him or out to lunch lately. But then he said, hey, we're going to jump in a van and let's go do some visits. And again, just wow. And so every time we go to see things and we interact with students and staff, just more amazing things. I think Superintendent Gronseth points out some exciting things that are yet to come, but just wow on where we're at right now. So thank you for your work.
We're getting there.
Member Lafleur-Kemp.
I just wanted to add to, I also just appreciate it, and I know you're required to do some of this, but the page where you highlighted the graduation rate and skill assessment rate and that section. Just it's so important that when we hear graduation rates, we're just seeing work like this that is helping our students succeed, and we sometimes the CTE classes get lost in kind of the value of graduation rates. So I just appreciated the detail you provided there.
And I think it's one to point out with that is the graduation rate and then also the credentialing, that our programs, we went from when I got here, I think we were at about 32 industry credentials, and then last year we topped 86, and this year we're hoping for 120. And what that means is a kid, even if they don't graduate or even if they decide to go to work after they graduate, the credential follows them to work. So if they go with our SolidWorks certification, they can go to a firm and start designing right away for them. Or if they have their CNA or their OSHA 10, those are all just different certifications that at least help them if life takes them somewhere that doesn't get them to that path that we wanted originally. And that's the route we've gone, as opposed to just some standardized testing. Is the industry credential, to me, is more important to them than just a data point that says that they have the skills. So we've made that commitment. And Perkins covered those costs for every student. So that's where we use the Perkins funding to take care of that so the kids don't have any limiting factor.
Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Great stuff. So we're going to just continue, and I'm going to move right to the number 2 action items, the policies, because again, the grant applications we'll pass those along on our Tuesday night meeting. So we want to then get to our action policies. They're on page 20 of our board book, and our first policy is the crisis management policy. We're going to delete, or we're looking at deleting 5123 and adopting a new policy 806, and I believe we're on the first reading of this, second reading of this one. Okay. Oh, second reading, yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have some excitement in the policy world for you tonight. So lined up, we have 4 this evening. The first 2 of them are a second reading, and that would be policy 806, which is a second reading, and then 535. Again, these were both as a result of the compliance audit we did at the Office of Civil Rights, and so this would be our second reading. So starting with the crisis management policy, there were minor revisions from the first reading to the second reading. Are there any questions regarding this policy and anything that you'd like to offer for feedback, suggestions, recommendations? I will share again that we did use our emergency response crisis manual, and we aligned this with that, so that is a piece of this as well. And when we talked kind of about the Ellis pieces, we'll continue to work those pieces in, and those will be in the practice pieces and in that manual. So beyond the policy, they'll be continue to work through the safety team on that work, but this policy will helps to drive some of that.
Assistant Superintendent, not to, just is there anything in the crisis management policy, that we're adopting that, maybe you struggled with as a team putting it together or thinking about the language? As I look at the policy, and I've got a fairly strong background in what we had been doing and what kind of crisis we talk about. Probably one of my ahas or my questions, but I understand it, is just on page 25 when we talk about communication and how that's going to work. Of course, we know almost in everything we've talked about throughout even tonight's meeting, we do kind of, it hinges on communication and how effective we think we are. And I even, I just wonder if there's anything in our policy that gives you just a little bit of a pause or an insight into what you think?
I guess, reflecting on the process we went through and the conversations we've had, and looking at other district policies. Generally, when I have a policy review, I try to look at a few other school districts out there to see what they've done in addition to MSBA model policy, in addition to our feedback, just to get a little bit more comprehensive understanding of where other people have gone, get some other practices, ideas. Sometimes I call some folks on it too. Crisis management policy, I think we want to have a plan, and plans are important, we still have to allow for the response of a site given the circumstances they have within that, and for our ability to know that there are going to be some, we can't pre-predict every single situation. So I think in the policy, as I kind of went through it and we were naming things out, I kept asking myself, how do we write a policy that ensures we get the right things in place so our teams can make the right decisions and we can get the right things to parents while still allowing the sites to work in the manner that which might be best for them and for us to adapt and change with things on an annual basis. So those are just some questions I found myself asking myself as we went through this process, and I think our policy does allow for that. It allows our sites to go through and assess where they're at with things, allows us to use the communication tools that we have at our disposal as a school district, and to continue coordination with outside agencies in developing response plans, communication, if there's an evacuation and things. And so I think the policy does address that. So, but that was, as I was going through, that was something I kept asking myself, yeah.
And then with our policies, all of them that we have been adopting and rewriting, but especially this one. So then, where does this go? I mean, I know it goes into our policy books, but how do we get this? How does this get to our staff and our leadership?
This would be through the manual. And so the manual really drives that. So this policy kind of says this is what the manual should do. And so this links the two pieces together. And then from that manual, there is documentation that would be sent out to the sites. And then the sites have kind of a template, if you will, and then they can develop their plans. A lot of times they'll say similar from year to year, but they still will come together on an annual basis to review those plans and make sure that they're up to date.
So if we approve this on Tuesday night, it's the second reading, then it is our policy. Mm-hmm. And then it rolls out next fall in our crisis management protocol that all schools go through on their first days.
Correct. And I would say that we were already doing a lot of these practices that the
Okay.
policy outlines through that manual. Our policy now probably better reflects what we currently do as best practice.
Okay. Seeing no questions, further questions up? Are you? Okay. Oh, next policy. Okay, so the counseling and pre-career and tech program counseling. This one is in our second reading as well, and it's on page 33 and 34 of our manual, of our board.
Yep, so, go ahead. Oh, no, please, go ahead. I was just going to introduce it, but go ahead, please.
So I remember discussing this last month and us talking about whether or not we're talking about all counseling or if we're just talking about pre-career and tech programs. And it seems to me that this is more the second one directed. And I think that perhaps we should change the title to reflect that and say counseling in or counseling relative to, so that it doesn't seem like we're talking about all counseling generally, so that the scope is very clear. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's one suggestion I have, which I don't think would require another reading sort of set up. And then I still am concerned about, in part 3 here, how we're determining what disproportionate enrollment is. I think that needs to be more specifically defined somewhere. And then what actions we are going to take to ensure that the disproportionate enrollment is not the result of discrimination. I just think it's so vague that it's entirely meaningless, in my opinion. And I think we talked about this a little bit last time.
I'm going to let Assistant Superintendent Horton go, and then I'll go back to Member Oswald.
So my first response would be just in general, the policy did narrow in scope, correct? We did talk with the Office of Civil Rights, and we talked about the broader idea of disproportionality and what that means, and what that could or should be. Their recommendation to us was meet compliance and narrow your scope. I did speak with another school district, and there was a presentation that we'd seen in terms of really doing this work on a broader scale, and it was about an 8-year process. And so my thought, and based on the recommendation of them, was that let's narrow the focus, meet the compliance piece. If there's a conversation we had later, great. But that was a pretty massive movement to try to do that from the other district I spoke to. So that it did narrow in scope. You're 100% correct with that. In terms of maybe the teeth with it, I think is what you're referring to. I guess I'm looking to the rest of the board for input on that and what their thoughts are right now, in terms of that being in policy, or if that being something more in practice. And I don't know. In our procedures, for example, sometimes with policies, the flexibility is helpful for administration in terms of its application, because as teams change, as staffing changes, as things develop, it allows us to live within the policy still. So I think that might be a conversation point: is how narrow or wide do you want the policy to be?
Member Oswald?
The first thing I was going to suggest is under one where it says counseling materials, that perhaps we can just change it to course materials. I don't know that counseling is necessarily what they want there. Because when I think of counseling materials, I think much more of the psychology aspect of why do you want to do this and how can you do this? When you're talking about advertising the courses that you're offering and making sure it doesn't just stereotype certain individuals, that's about a course. It's not about counseling. I totally agree with Member Sandstead about what is disproportionate enrollment. It's not defined in here anywhere that I can understand. If there's a definition that we can include of what is disproportionate enrollment, that might help in that, because the number 2 under section 1 about disproportionate enrollment, it says that we're going to evaluate whether disproportionate enrollment is the result of discrimination, or addresses instances of disproportionate enrollment and take steps. Well, I mean, we can evaluate whether it is, and we can go, no, it's not, and we're done, and we still follow the policy. That's not what it's speaking to. I don't know if disproportionate enrollment is something that's concrete and is the same in every instance, or if it changes versus what you're talking about. I don't know. Any insight on that?
Superintendent Grantset?
I think if, considering the report that Mr. Vietz just provided with us, and knowing that this is required information that he tracks as well, as far as the non-traditional and students of color in programs, we know that we're tracking those data points, and so I think that this policy goes hand in hand with that. I think that it does it lists examples of steps that can be taken and things that can be looked at. So I think between the two, I think it accomplishes what we're hoping for, unless there are specific things that you saw that weren't included in that.
Member Sandstead?
Member Gorham's had his light on.
Member Gorham?
I agree with the comment about, how do you do this? And I don't know if you do it on a class-by-class basis. Are you looking at individual classes? And I'd say if you were, you're looking at a class of, 20 to 30 kids, comparing it to a population of 2,000. You just, statistically, that just doesn't work. So I guess my preference is keep it broad. But yeah, I don't know how we do this.
Nora Sandsted? Member Sandsted?
I'm assuming that MDE doesn't have a definition that they want us to live by in terms of disproportionate.
I don't have a MDE definition of it. What I would say is that you look at the proportion, you look at the demographics of your school in the different groups and categories, and you would analyze your class and say,
right, but is it?
I don't know if there's a definition.
If we're 1% off,
right.
Are we disproportionate? If we're 19% off, that's the question: is where do we draw the line at what qualifies as disproportionate? And is it based on one offering of the class? 6th period aerospace engineering, or is it all year offering, and so how are we going to measure this if we're saying we're going to measure it?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's something that you have a conversation around, and my thought is that they might have been intentional in not doing that, because if I think about secondary scheduling and the number of conflicts that happen and the reasons why a student may or may not take a course, those are good conversations to have. And so should you address it and identify it as through a process? Yes. Should there be teeth to it? I think if it's embedded within your practices, which it should be embedded into the PLC practice, it should be part of MTSS conversations. I would say that should take care of it. I don't have a number that I could recommend to that, though. Like if you're off by 6%, or because given a class of 6 or 30, it's so variable. I think, as is alluded to.
Do we have a thought? Maybe Superintendent, you want to answer this? We've got or designee. Do you have an idea on how this might actually be put into place?
I wish Mr. Vieth was still here at the moment, because I know that there are guidelines as far as the CTE reporting that we do with him, and I'm wondering what the parameters are for measurements that he has, because they are also looking for disproportionate non-traditional participation and completion, and I'm wondering if there could be pairing between those, or if he said there are changes in the federal Perkins guidelines, I wonder if there's anything in there that also speaks to it, and I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that if we pass this and we came back a year from now, not me, the rest of you know, and said, okay, let's see the report for 2019, 2020, no, 2020, whatever.
It's going to be 18, 19 next year.
Right. What that would look like. Would that say, hey, look, we already do this Perkins report and it's the same information, so we can just two birds with one stone, and it's the designee then turns out to be Mr. Vieth as head of CTE, or I think, I just feel like as a policy, we're just kind of brainstorming how this might work right now, which is not really what I'm comfortable with in terms of actually implementing.
So I'm getting confused because you two both are sharing a mic, which is fine, but, so is this, Rosie, is your light on?
Yep.
Was it on before Dave Kirby's? Okay.
I was
Remember,
David, because
I just couldn't tell which ones.
My fault.
As a chair, I want
Two quick things. Okay. One is, we're talking about the policy and we're talking about the practice. And so I think what I was hearing you say is that we can, what you were recommended by the Office of Civil Rights is to pass this policy, but there is still room in there for the practice. And is that right? Is that what I heard you? And was there, getting more specific, so were there any other recommendations from the Office of Civil Rights?
I did share these two policies with them. I asked, will this meet the compliance standpoint? I did look at other districts and what they had, and these are in line with what other districts have. And so I think to your point, absolutely, like where do those conversations happen? And I don't want to speak for other school districts because I didn't ask that specific question, but my inference would be based on how the policy is written that they would embed it into an implementation and monitoring team meeting, for example, if that's what you had in a district, or it could fall into CTE at the site level. I would say, a district or building administration, what do you have going on with their PLCs? Where are they having conversations about this? I think an example just off the top of my head is our pathways classes. I know that's been something we really want to talk about, who's in those classes, and so that's the conversation I know that they're having at the building level and that we're having at the district level, and those show up on the teams for whatever structures we have in place for that year. Sometimes those structures can change based on initiative, based on staffing, based on X, Y, Z. So I can only infer that, though. I can't speak for other districts, though, on that.
Member Kirby.
I need some clarification, I guess. The disproportionate part is only with regard to race, sex, and disability, because when we look at counseling, it asks for sexual orientation, religion. Well, we don't gather that information on people in courses. So I assume that's not part of the disproportionality. We just make sure the course material isn't biased that way.
I'm going to just share a little bit too before I go to Member Sandstead. So I do think that what Member Kirby just kind of opened up is something too. We don't want to. So I see this as this is a policy they want us to try to attempt, and if there's seen to be disproportionality, they want to be able to come to counselors and to buildings and say, why is there? And if it's clear that it just happens because sixth hour is the only hour that class, that automotive or that Phi-Ed or that whatever tends to maybe have a disproportionate gender, race, ethnicity, whatever, they want to say, did you do everything possible to make sure that there was no bias? And when and counseling materials, to me at least, is somewhat addressed in that second section where it says, we want to make sure that when Jill Lofald puts together a PowerPoint or a brochure and to encourage kids either for debate or speech or my class, because we do it all the time, we're doing it right now, that we are not unintentionally creating a bias that makes it look like only this person would take the public speaking class, because that's all the brochure addressed. So this policy is saying, we want you to have a little conversation with Mrs. Lofald, because it looks like she might be only establishing a handout that looks a little like it might be biased because it's not open. At least that's how I see this policy in 1 and 2. It's like, as a district, let's make you aware of some unintentional bias that your counseling office is creating, or we are. When you do your state of the school, and we have all of our district information on PowerPoints and on calendars and in booklets. But again, we're just doing career and CTE. So, so I just think that this is a guiding policy that says, let's make sure. And I think that the teeth of it is, if we do tend to see it, that we address it. I don't think there's an attempt to punish or to somehow, be punished by the commission that's asking us to take a look. They're just saying, can you become more consciously aware of how you advertise the CTE classes? Where do you go for them? And how do you encourage, and Brad addressed it, how do you encourage more females more males in the med classes, more females in your auto class? And even if there's disproportionate enrollment, I think what this policy is saying is address it, at least talk about it. I don't think they're saying you have to fix it. Find out why and make sure that it's not some kind of counseling materials. And so I look at the counseling materials as just their information they pass out. That's the materials I'm at least thinking. Member Sands.
I totally agree with what you're saying. I think that is the intent here, and I think that this policy, that we are discussing it now, and my concern is that we'll pass the policy and then it'll never be considered again because it's vague enough that we don't really have to do anything under the policy, in my mind. And so having, you know, I mean, it does say that there has to be sort of an annual compliance, but there's not a lot of specificity to that. And so I think it would be good to have some sort of follow-up, whether or not it's in the policy or whether or not we just agree that, you know, a year from now we check in and make sure that we're implementing the policy, sort of thing. Another point I wanted to make is under section 2, B and C. I don't know that they really fit in this section. C, I think, is misleading and probably needs to be cut entirely because it duplicates what's under 1.2, but it's only specific to gender, and so that just strikes me as oddly narrow. So I think we could just cut it entirely. And then B, I don't know if it goes under material. We're under the materials section, and this seems sort of broader than that. So I would maybe rearrange that. But I just think that we could clarify what counseling materials mean, and I think that Member Lofald is right, that it means materials we put out to attract students to our career and tech ed programs. And I think if we just define that clearly, that will help quite a bit. We don't necessarily have to change the language like Member Oswald suggested, but to just clarify what we mean by counseling materials. Right. So that it's a useful policy that we actually read and follow up on and implement. That's my suggestion, and now I'm leaving. Sorry.
Do you mind if I ask a question real quick, just so I can get your sense since you're taking up? Would a definitions section be beneficial? Because I've heard two recommendations, potentially. So definitions potentially.
Yes.
Okay.
Member Oswald.
I'm not sure what the exact intent of forcing this policy onto us. It came from the Department of Human Rights. And so if it was just an MSBA policy, I would much more think that it was like, you know, let's check this out, let's do this. I am much more concerned that the Department of Human Rights wants us to have this policy to hold us accountable in ways of, not that, did you do this? Well, maybe you should try to do this. They're going to go, it's your policy, you must do it. And I guess that depends on which way we want to look at it, depending on the intent of why they put it forward. I would think, just the way I understand the Department of Human Rights, they're much more wanting to have something with teeth to hold us accountable. But I would rather think of it in the way that Member Lofald has eloquently stated it. That's definitely much more friendly, but that's not what I see in my mind because of many of the groups that I work with. You know, they want something to go, ha, you broke your policy, now fix it. Now you have to fix it because it's the law. It's your own rule of law, and if you're not going to follow your own law, then how is it? So I'm nervous about passing a policy that I'm not sure how to read it, I guess.
Member Lafleur-Kemp.
Yeah, I just wondered, is this something that we should, well, definitely, if we pass it, review with our guidance counselors, but is there a point of getting feedback from them on the policy? Would be helpful as well, whether it's the language of it or just kind of make use of their expertise.
Do you want to reply to that now, or do you want to have Member Gorham? Member Gorham, you're on.
As I'm listening to this conversation, just kind of taking it all in, it is sort of a vague policy. It's a spirit policy. It's an attitude policy. And I don't have any problem having it because I think we already embody it, or want to embody it, or strive to, I should say. As evidenced by Mr. Horton tonight talking about the book from Ellis. There's an awareness there. And I think it's being built all throughout our district and is there. I have full confidence after what Mr. Veith presented tonight that we are striving to do this intentionally. I don't have any worry about it. If someday we are not, we have a policy and someone can call us out on it. And if we don't have good answers and good evidence, then we better figure that out. But as of right now, it almost feels like a non-factor because I think we're doing it. Any points to the contrary, I'd be glad to listen. But
so do you want to answer, or I've got some observations as well?
Whichever you would like to do.
I'm going to give some observations, I think, too, as the years. I mean, I think, so I'm thinking on Member Oswald's, like the human rights asked us to do this for a reason, somehow. They went through our buildings and staff and talked, right? That was part of their journey. Yep, all of our policies, and so this was their recommendation. So there's a part of me that, is there a deadline to when we have to have the policy adopted by them, which was March? Okay, so, no matter what we decide, because, I like what Member Gorham said, that I do think we strive to this. And if we listen to Brad Veith, he's passionate, he's smart, he's done a lot of work, we're going to strive for this policy. But my years in education in our building, I know that disproportionate issues happen. I mean, they do. You have to be crazy not to think that. I sub in the weight class at Denfeld, and granted, I don't think that's a career in tech, but think of the auto and the horticulture and the aerospace physics. So you don't think if you walked into aerospace physics classroom right now, what gender do you think you'd see in there?
A mix.
Well, I hope so. That'd be great. That would be great if we do. The stereotype would be that we wouldn't, but maybe we are already halfway there. And this policy is just them saying, we want you to double check. We want you to make sure. And if there is more females in that medical occupations class, we want to make sure that your brochures, that your talk, that your registration materials, that your presentations are not totally one gender or one issue, and I think we can work towards that. I think our hands are tied. I think we're going to be looking at this policy, and I think we should vote to support it, because otherwise we just create another obstacle or another potential misinterpretation that somehow we are not meeting standard and they're down. I think this is a policy that we could look at more positively and say, we do it a lot, and we're just going to make sure that all of our counseling materials, all of our enrollments, and if we see something that is a red flag, we're going to address it before human rights comes and tells us we need to again. That would be my guess. That's my observation. How did I do?
Great as always. One thing I just wanted to share was that in my conversations with the Office of Civil Rights, they really focused on process, and I think that's kind of what we see in this, is that they don't always come in and say this is what you have to do, but they want to ensure that a process was followed to do considerations. When I call, for example, on 504 plans and things, it's really a lot about process. Like, did you go through the process, and did you consider this, and did you consider that? And that's a lot of where they go with this, and I think this policy kind of demonstrates it's more about process. I do agree that I think we already are doing things with this, and this just kind of states what we're doing. One thing that I think really stands out to me is the T tool when going through some of these. So if we do identify something that we see as, what's going on here, or maybe we need to coach staff and support staff or a team around having deeper conversation, let's pull out the T form and go through that, and that would help us consider these different protected classes. So I do think we have some things in place that would do that in our practices. But those are, so that's just some feedback based on my experiences with the Office of Civil Rights and just in thinking about some things that we're currently doing.
Member Loeffler-Kemp or
Yeah,
Superintendent?
I appreciate, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think it's you.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah. Jill, I
Just being-
appreciated your background and your kind of perspective that you gave to it. And, I think that's partly what I was saying too, in terms of like the section where examples of what can be done. You know, that's where I think our guidance offices and our guidance counselors, for example, can review this, and they will come up with additional things that they're doing. You know, they will be able to think about it and come up with ideas, as well as I know many of these things are being done in different ways, just having 3 kids that have gone through our school system. So I think we need to move it forward and not tinker with it too much. Yeah.
But I did like Member Sandsted's direction. Assistant Superintendent Horton, did you get that, where she thought it would be better to title our policy Counseling in Pre-Career and Tech Programs instead of Counseling and Pre-Career? Is that something we can agree on for next Tuesday? Is that something you don't like? Want to give me some feedback?
I wrote a question mark with the word in or within. What would you like to see?
I think within seems like a good word.
4? Counseling for pre and career.
A suggestion regarding.
Counseling regarding pre-career and tech programs? Okay, Superintendent, go for it.
Personally, I think it's more like marketing than counseling, but that's a whole nother direction that we won't go in. But yeah.
All right. There will be an Indian leg wrestling tournament, American Indian leg wrestling tournament, to determine the winner. So all those interested, there'll be a sign-up sheet in my office, and winner take all. I got long levers. My money is on Board Member Gorham, though. I think he's got some blue shoelaces over there. He's got something going on.
Moving right along.
Moving to our next policy that I believe might be in its first reading. Is this the one?
Yes.
The school weapons policy. Policy 501, and deletion of policy 1083. I find it interesting. I mean, I thought our policies, we were doing this review to kind of get less pages, and the ones we've done today have gone from a paragraph to, but they are big policies. That's why I knew tonight's chunk of time would come from our policy questions. But we are now on page 36, I think, of our board books.
Which one? You're on weapons policy right now?
School weapons policy, I think. Isn't that what's next?
Yeah.
I'm kind of logged out here.
So
It's in its first reading.
at the last school board meeting or education meeting, we had said that we wanted to review the cross-reference policies at the same time. So these were 2 that we did bring forward. There actually are 2 more that we need to do. One is going to come through human resources, and one more was kind of a question mark where it falls. I'm going to take that one, but it's not ready for this one. So it'll be a first reading on our next agenda. We'll bring that to agenda setting. School weapons policy. So this is MSBA model policy is how this started out. You have a red line copy. Not a lot of significant changes when I read through this. I'm looking at our handbook and looking at what there is. The one place that we did have some conversation, we really looked at employees and what employees have rights to under state statute and what they don't. So this would be at the top of page, in my paper copy, it's page 4 of the policy. So it'd be sections 4 and number exceptions all the way down to number 2 under letter D, or firearms in school parking lots and parking facilities.
I think it's on 39 of our. Member Oswald?
I have a comment and a question. The question, speaking of consequences for student weapon possession, use, distribution, section 5, do those consequences line up with what we have listed in our family and student handbook policies with discipline?
Can you tell me again where you're looking?
Section 5, yes, on page 39, where we were. The big V.
Gotcha. I would say that our administrators within practice have an opportunity to interpret a situation as what is a weapon and what is not. Within the policy, it does define what we have in terms of a weapon. And what those could be and some exceptions to that. So I would say it does for the most part. We will be bringing this to the handbook committee who is meeting currently, and so we'll be looking at any revisions to that handbook moving forward, yes. So it matches closely, but we would want to double check. Sorry.
I just want to make sure that the consequences listed here are also included in the handbook, because we all want to know what's good and bad when we're contemplating doing something. The other question I have is, there it is, that I fully support a weapons policy like this. However, we're just talking about Ellis training and using things as potential weapons against people, that are potentially bad people. So my question is there going to be consequences for anyone that during an extreme, unlikely, please God, never let it happen event, for students that use a weapon and get a non-bad person thinking they're a bad person, that they misuse a weapon? And is there that something significant here that we might want to add a line about, other rules apply during extreme behavior events or something, building events? In an Ellis situation or a mistaken Ellis situation, if I'm understanding your question appropriately, if there was bodily harm to an individual, that would probably be handled. I mean, there would be our side, but I think there would be things outside the school that would probably come into play as well with that. So I can't speak to a mistaken situation very well, I don't think. I think there's a lot of variables there, but if there's an actual active threat, we're teaching people to counter, and so that could mean a lot of different things. And if there's an active shooter in our school and you hit them in the head with a stapler, I'm willing, as the assistant superintendent, to give you a free pass on that. But if you hit a teacher coming in to warn you about the guy coming down, will there be a consequence?
In a situation like that, do you want to?
September.
Are you raising your hand?
Superintendent Gronseth wants to come in.
Are you raising your hand? I think you raised your hand.
I was raising my hand. Pick me. Couple of things. One, whenever anything could be considered a weapon. My pen could be considered a weapon. It's more about how we use it than what it is. I'm sure there are legal definitions of what a deadly weapon is, but the term weapon, it really could be anything. We also always consider intent when we are talking about disciplinary consequences, and the policy I'm getting tired. Either that or it's catchy. It includes administrative discretion, and I think that would be a case where we talk about intent, when we talk about what actions were taken in what setting, and then discretion would be being able to, from our side, from the school side, control what those are. If there were charges that happened outside of school, as there could be at any time, those are handled outside of the schools. But as far as what our consequences are and how we handled it would be our discretion.
Is it worth noting, adding in line in there that, other rules apply in an outside threat or in a building threat? Because people may use this against us, and legally outside of a class, outside sources, legal problems can point to this policy and use that against some people, that sort of thing. My intent is to make it clear that in extreme circumstances, this doesn't apply.
I think the administrative discretion takes care of it, saying may use discretion in determining whether under the circumstances a course of action other than the minimum consequences specified is warranted. So it does say that you're going to look at the circumstances. So I think it's covered.
Okay.
Assistant Superintendent, keep going.
I'm just on from earlier. I never turned my mic off. So,
Superintendent Grunstead?
Nope, that was Member Leflickim.
It was one question I had that was in red under section 6, or no, not 6 here.
Of which policy?
Of the weapons policy. So it's under firearms in school parking lots and parking facilities, and it's number 2, and it's about an employee who is a permit holder. I guess
page 39 of our board book.
What was that?
Page 39 on our board book.
Okay, thank you.
For those that want to look at it.
I question the same thing.
So, yeah, that one just kind of stuck out when I was reading this, and explain it to me.
Absolutely. So, Superintendent Gronseth and I actually had a conversation in my office about this one, and the employees do have legal rights by statute that are protected that we cannot infringe upon. However, we can put things more restrictive in place, and so it reads, an employee who is a permit holder authorized under Minnesota statute 624.74 to carry a pistol in the interior of a vehicle or outside the motor vehicle for the purpose of directly placing a firearm in or retrieving it from the trunk or rear area of the vehicle must receive written permission from the superintendent/designee. We can't tell them that they can't do that, but we can make it more restrictive in the fact that they have to get approval from the superintendent. We can make it more restrictive in terms of having a firearm trigger lock on there and stored in a locked container or locked compartment in the vehicle, so somebody couldn't break into the car and just get into it. There would be it'd be locked in addition to it. There'd also be a fire trigger on there, so if disgruntled employee, student who knows it's in there, would have other things in place that they would have to go through. It couldn't just be accessible. But we can't say that someone who's who is a legal right to and permit holder under that statute, we can't say you can't do that.
I guess with that, I certainly understand there are rights for permit holders, but are we making sure we, how do I want to say this, have it as tight as we can to their restrictions or safety?
I'm definitely open to more restrictions. These were ones that that I came up with through my reading. So there's the superintendent, there's the trigger lock, and then there's the additional lock within a vehicle. We can be more restrictive in those things if there's additional pieces that we would want to consider. those were my initial first attempts based on some suggestions I had from readings.
Member Oswald.
What is the age of people? What's the minimum age a person can get a permit to carry?
I don't know off the top of my head. This part is in relationship to employees only, though, so students would fall under a different category.
Well, it would, but employees. But if don't adults have the same rights or no?
No, it has to be, the language is non-student and it's not, so anybody who's a student would fall under our other rules. It has to be a non-student, and then there's employee, so those are the different categories that they would have: student, non-student, and employee.
Okay.
Be 21.
Good. My other comment on that is with our contracted drug sniffing dogs, they alert to guns in your trunks and cars, and so this would lead to identification of people who are legally possessing them, and I think that needs to be made aware when that instance occurs, if it should, because of bias and people can view it as a threat that this person may have something in their car, even though they're allowed to have it. So.
Member Loeffler.
Yeah, so I will do a little bit of work with people I know that follow these policies very closely all over the country and bring back, we're in our first reading, so I appreciate the thought you put into it already. So I would just like it to go the extreme. So,
Member Gorham? Oh, okay.
Thank you. I appreciate and look forward to that feedback.
Seeing no other lights on this policy, I think that it concludes our policy section. Do we have one more?
We have one more.
Oh, the school. Oh, it is school discipline. Okay. 41. You're right. So let's keep trucking right through. We've got policy 5085 set for deletion on our first reading tonight. We're going to replace it with policy 506 on student discipline. Take it away.
So this policy went from a paragraph to 25 pages. So I don't know that I really helped you in trimming down. So I have missed that. But I think we have a decent draft of a policy here in regards to student discipline. You'll notice in the handbook, or on there, I did, again, as usual, I looked at some other school districts and what they were using. I took a look at MSBA model policy. I also tried to think about where the Minnesota Department of Human Rights is taking us, and take that into consideration through the work we've done and the conversations we've had in writing this. So I really wanted to kind of present it in that light. There's quite a bit of redlining in there that was taken out. Some of those things in there I don't think invite best practices. And I think the policy needs, I don't think adopting some of the things in there I don't think that they're very good practices. And based on our conversations with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights and looking at some other districts who have adopted this policy recently, they too have made edits to those sections. And some of the policy language was encouraging kicking kids out of class, I felt, which is not something that we really want to do. We want to be talking about keeping kids in class, increasing instructional minutes, keeping things positive. Some of the elements of the trainings that we've done, whether it be through Care Academy, whether it be restorative practices, or whatever things we may have been talking about, whether it been district-led or site-based or individual teachers or just general best practices out there, I've tried to touch and leave that open for this to reflect that. So when you start kind of getting into it, you'll see some of that. We also spell out the IEP process a little bit more detailed, which is not in the model policy, and talk about what that means. Also some language around suspensions and removals and dismissals and what those means, which we'll want to align with our handbook. And so this policy will get shared forward with the Family Handbook Committee, Family and Student Handbook Committee, to review some of those and make sure that our Family and Student Handbook reflects that. So that's just kind of in a nutshell what what has kind of happened in here. And I know it is a very lengthy one, but thought that those updates would really help us with our OSS work. And so that was the hope of the policy, and I'm definitely interested in any feedback you have.
Member Oswald.
I'm looking at page 55. And the number would be item 5C. C as in cookie. Yep. Sorry. The statement is students who are removed from class will be in the custody of the administrator /administrative designee. I have a personal pet peeve on this that I have witnessed myself, in that oftentimes the administrative designee is the principal's administrative assistant secretary at the elementary levels. And I know watching kids is not in their contract, and they don't get any training on how to handle kids that are being stinkers instead of thinkers. So I just really would encourage that we don't use, for lack of a better term, I apologize, secretaries to administer or be supervisors of misbehaving children. It doesn't serve the children well. It doesn't help correct the behaviors all that well. And if we want to get them to be back in class, I think we need to do that better. And if it has to be, I think training is absolutely mandatory in how to handle that. But it disrupts their workday and what they're going to get done anyway.
I was going to say, any other comments? Maybe we just haven't had a chance to work through it. I do know that one of my observations over the weekend and looking at the meeting today was that, there was just a lot of policy to go through. That's why that first time I asked you, like, what do you see in this that you struggled with, or that you, want us to look at more closely? I know that, we take policy pretty importantly on this board. We analyze it, we scrutinize it, we put it to the test because we sign off on it when we vote on it. But again, we're still in the first reading for this. And, sometimes so when we go to second reading next week or next month, what if we still, can we go for a third reading so we can keep kind of going through the policy until we're comfortable passing whatever we've crafted. And with that, then, I'm comfortable with spending some time on this policy. Are we sharing this with teachers right now? Like, are teachers looking at? Not yet. I know it, huh? It's public.
Anything's on board book is public.
But are we letting our teachers know that the school board is looking specifically at student discipline and classroom procedures, and what we as a board are thinking we're going to do? And if I know we don't, that's just my question. And then this is great work to plow through these policies, so thank you on that.
Yep.
And Member Oswald. Superintendent, one of the two.
Well, you asked a question, okay. So I was going to answer it.
And then I had something to add, yeah.
We do, in my weekly updates to staff, we do talk about things that the board is working on. And so, to be honest, I'm not sure how many people engage with that and take a look at it, but we do share that information.
And what I was just going to add is that you just referenced a lot of these policies will eventually go to our parent handbook, and that's also reviewed by, we would pass the policy, of course, but that's just another, I guess, avenue for us is to look at the current parent handbook and see if there's something that sticks out in this kind of section or area. as we're looking at this 25 pages of the policy, there just might be something that, I mean, I read that parent handbook, and I've had to use it as a parent, and so, you know, that might be a way to think about this 25-page policy. And thank you also for your work on it, Jeff.
Yeah, we're at an interesting time in our state with handbook discipline policies and things, and I think that's the lens I really tried to take with this policy, and I think that I had a conversation about how the family and student handbook fits into this policy as a regulation and whatnot, and how to set some best practices through the collaboration with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights and our Family and Student Handbook Committee. So I think offering some guidance through the policy to support best practices is a good thing to be thinking about as you're looking at this practice. I think that if the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, if we come with some huge ahas, I think that would be something to come back and maybe make some edits to it as we continue to get better at this. Right now, I was able to kind of get a sneak peek about where some of the things are going through our work with the committees and whatnot, so I think this will reflect a large piece of that, but the meat and potatoes will come through the Family and Student Handbook, which we get to review annually, and I like that. I did that for you, Superintendent Gronslick, because I know you're hungry. And although you don't, I'm sorry, tofu and potatoes. But I think that'll allow us really to kind of engage on an annual basis, because my worry, and you talk about what things I'm thinking about, is how do we continually review and have this conversation and keep it going as we continue to try to reduce suspensions and expulsions, and I think this sets up our handbook to do that. So those are just some things I was thinking about as I was going through, so interested in feedback now or in the future on how you feel about that.
Moving on. I think so. Good job, though. Thank you. We'll keep going. So I think that brings us to the part of the agenda that, again, is just things that we're going to approve on our Tuesday meeting. It will be things like our Wolf Ridge extended trip and our diploma requests. And I don't see anything other things, placeholders, but Superintendent Gronseth, he has an update for us.
I have an update for you. I have been updated by the National Weather Service that snow is predicted to start at 3 in the morning. We are predicted to get 6 to 8 inches by 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Should be light, fluffy snow. I think we're going to be okay, but I'll still be getting up at 3:45 in the morning to check.
I do have one final question. It doesn't have to get answered now, but these policies came about by doing the cross-reference. So my next question would be, is that I'll be bringing these policies along with a few other ones. Do you want me to continue to do that? So which would mean I'd be bringing an additional maybe 3 or 4 policies forward at our next board meeting in addition to these. Is that the process that you felt comfortable with in this meeting, knowing that it got a little longer? And
it's a lot of policies, but we got to get through them.
okay.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, if you feel like you are able to get, policies done and all the other visits and all the other responsibilities you have, you shall and me shall, yeah. But we appreciate it. We have kind of had a stall in some of the updates, so yeah, I think that if we continue to plow ahead, that would be a really. I think that just looks like a strong working school board that we.
Not all 25 pages.
But
yeah, that's a lot of policies.
So,
and don't feel like you have to do 4 all the time. But you're right. Member Oswald was it was a very good observation last month that we are adopting new policy. We might not have the right policies in place as we are deleting. So if we can continue to cross-reference and bring us the ones that you feel have the most potential to be, leaving us in a position where that might not be effective is what we want. But these are meaty policies for us to plow through, the ones we did tonight. really important. I really do look at this, the student discipline one, and know that it's the direction and vision that we have.
And some of them will start overlapping, but like student discipline has 6 policies, 6 cross-references, and then the other one has 9. So if I were to try to get them all done, it'd be those 9 new policies for a first reading and other ones. So I guess my question is, do you want me bringing 9 policies forward, or do you want me to maybe over a series of time do
3.
a few? Okay,
3 at a
gotcha.
time.
I just wasn't sure after our last meeting when we talked about the
Oh,
cross-reference.
no.
So I
We
want to make sure I got you what you needed.
Too.
Okay.
Maybe if we had a policy.
Cool. Thank you.